You already knew it wasn't working. Not recently. A while ago. Maybe a long while ago. But you stayed. And when you tried to explain why, even to yourself, the answer sounds something like this. I've already given so much. If I leave now, what was it all for? We've been through too much together to just walk away. I can't quit now. Not after everything I've invested. Those sentences feel like wisdom, like loyalty, like the kind of commitment that separates people who follow through from people who give up at the first sign of difficulty. They're not. They're a cognitive bias, one so predictable, so universal, and so deeply embedded in how the human brain makes decisions that economists named it decades ago and have been studying it ever since. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. And it's the single most common reason people stay in things that stopped working long before they finally left. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your brain does this, and the one question that cuts through it every time. Before we get into the mechanism, one thing worth saying clearly. This isn't about being weak or indecisive or unable to commit. The sunk cost fallacy doesn't target people who give up easily. It targets people who take their commitments seriously. People who believe that investment means something. That loyalty matters. That walking away from something you've put real time and energy and love into isn't a decision to make lightly. All of that is true. The problem isn't the commitment. It's that the brain uses past investment to answer a question it was never designed to answer. The question of what to do next. And if you watched our last video on why smart people are easier to manipulate, this will sound familiar. The more seriously you take your investments, the more sophisticated the justification your brain builds for protecting them. Intelligence doesn't protect you from this. It makes the rationalization more convincing. A sunk cost is anything already spent that cannot be recovered. Time, money, emotional energy, years of your life given to a relationship, a career, a version of yourself you worked hard to build. Once it's spent, it's gone. No decision you make from this point forward changes that. The years in the relationship don't come back if you stay. The money already spent on the degree doesn't return if you finish. The emotional investment doesn't get refunded if you keep going. It's sunk, irrecoverable, already in the past. The fallacy is allowing that irrecoverable cost to influence a forward-looking decision. Here's what rational decision-making actually requires, and this is the part the brain resists almost universally. The past is irrelevant. The only question that matters for any forward-looking decision is, what happens from here? Not what has already happened, not what has already been given, not what leaving would mean about the time already spent. From here, is this worth continuing? That's the only calculation that logic supports, because the sunk cost is the same regardless of what you decide. It doesn't decrease if you stay. It doesn't increase if you leave. It simply exists, fixed and unchangeable, in the past. But the brain doesn't experience it that way. The brain treats past investment as weight on the scale of future decisions. The more you've invested, the heavier the pull toward continuation, regardless of whether continuation makes any sense given what's actually in front of you. That pull isn't wisdom. It's a misfiring of a system designed for a much simpler world, one where abandoning an investment usually did mean losing it, where commitment and continuation were genuinely the same thing. In that world, don't waste what you've already put in with sound reasoning. In this one, it keeps people in relationships, careers, and situations long past the point where leaving would have been the rational and the kinder choice. 3 places. Keep each one in mind as we describe it. Number 1. In relationships. We've been together 5 years. I can't walk away now after everything we've been through. Notice what that sentence is actually doing. It's using the past to answer a question about the future. Not, is this working? Not, will this work? Just, look how much we've already invested. That's not a reason to stay. That's sunk cost dressed up as loyalty. And going back after a relationship has ended is where this bias is most dangerous. Nothing has changed except the discomfort of the loss, which return temporarily relieves by making the loss feel reversible. It isn't. Number 2. in careers and money. You're 3 years into a degree you hate, 2 years left. Every logical calculation says stop. But you've already spent 3 years, so you finish. Not because finishing makes sense from here, because not finishing feels like admitting the 3 years were wasted. The specific distortion. Your brain treats making the loss visible as the same thing as causing the loss. The money is already gone. The years are already spent. Leaving doesn't create the loss, it just stops adding to it. 3. In everyday habits. The diet that isn't working after 6 weeks, but 6 weeks feels like too much to abandon. The friendship that stopped being mutual, but 15 years feels like a reason to keep showing up. In each case, the past investment isn't a reason to continue. It's a weight that makes the honest evaluation harder. So, why is it so hard to override? Knowing about this bias doesn't make it stop. That's the part most people discover the hard way, including people who could define sunk cost fallacy before they ever watched this video. 2 specific reasons it persists even in people who know exactly what it is. The first is loss aversion. Decades of research, beginning with psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, has consistently shown that the pain of losing something is approximately twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something equivalent. Losing $100 feels roughly twice as bad as gaining $100 feels good, which means your brain is not a neutral calculator of costs and benefits. It is structurally biased toward avoiding loss, even when avoiding the loss costs more than accepting it would. Sunk cost fallacy is loss aversion applied to the past. Leaving feels like losing what was invested. Staying feels like keeping it, even though staying doesn't actually recover anything. The investment is gone either way. But the brain registers leaving as the moment of loss, so it pulls towards staying not because staying makes sense, but because staying postpones the feeling of losing. And postponing the feeling, even at a real, ongoing cost, consistently wins against accepting the feeling, even when accepting it would be cheaper. The second is identity investment. This one runs deeper than the financial calculation. When you've invested enough in something, a relationship, a career, a version of your life, it stops being just a decision you made. It becomes part of how you see yourself. The 5-year relationship isn't just 5 years of time. It's 5 years of being someone's partner, of building something, of being a person who committed and stayed and tried. Leaving doesn't just mean losing the investment. It means revising the story. Who were you during those years? What did those years say about your judgment? What does walking away say about the person you thought you were? Those questions make the decision feel much larger than it is, because they attach the forward-looking choice, do I continue from here, to a backward-looking identity question, what does this say about who I've been? And identity questions are almost always harder to answer clearly than practical ones. So how do you actually use this when you're standing inside the situation? The question, if I were starting from zero today, would I choose this, is the first step. But there are 3 practices that make it much harder for the sunk cost to quietly take over again. First, separate the emotional accounting from the practical accounting. Take a piece of paper and write 2 questions. What have I already invested? And then deliberately underneath it, if that investment were 0, what would I choose today? Don't let the answers mix. The first question acknowledges what you feel. The second tells you what to do next. Both are real. They just answer different questions. Second, give the decision a deadline. Sunk cost becomes especially powerful when decisions remain permanently open. You keep telling yourself you'll reassess next month. Then next month becomes next year, and every additional month becomes another reason not to leave. So choose a date. On this date, I will make the decision based only on what the situation is producing now. Not how long you've endured it, not how much you've already given, what is actually happening. And third, talk to someone who doesn't share your investment history. Someone outside the relationship, outside the career, outside the project. Someone who didn't watch you build it and therefore doesn't feel the same need to protect the story. You don't need them to make the decision for you. You need someone who can ask, without emotional attachment, if you had never invested anything in this, would you start today? Sometimes you don't need more information. You need distance from the information you've already spent years defending. So here's the one question that cuts through all of it. Not how much have I already given, not what does leaving say about the time I've already spent, not what will people think about me walking away from something I've invested so much in. This one. If I were starting from zero today, no history, no investment, no sunk cost, would I choose this? Would I choose this relationship knowing what I know now about how it actually works? Would I choose this career, this degree, this path, if I were standing at the beginning of it with full information about where it leads? Would I choose this habit, this friendship, this version of my life, if I had no prior investment pulling me toward it? If the answer is yes, stay. Not because of what came before, but because of what's actually in front of you. If the answer is no, then what you're protecting isn't the investment. It's the feeling that the investment meant something. And here's what's true and what the sunk cost fallacy makes it very hard to hold on to. It did mean something. The years were real. The love was real. The effort was real. None of that disappears when you leave. None of it becomes retroactively meaningless because you stopped. The past doesn't need the future to justify it. It already happened. It already mattered. And you are allowed to let it be what it was without making it the reason you stay somewhere you've already decided isn't working. Drop one word in the comments that names what this video gave you permission to do. I read every single one. Subscribe if you want to keep going. Because next week, we're moving from the bias that keeps you in things too long to the relationship pattern that keeps you giving more than you're getting. Even when you love them. Even when they love you. Next week, signs you're in a one-sided relationship. And why the imbalance is often invisible to the person carrying most of the weight. See you then.